Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Happy Thanksgiving. My name's Kevin Sharkey. I'm a realtor contractor, new investor in New Jersey. And here with me is Sir Glenn Wagstaff, an attorney, international business consultant. His experience includes business estate and tax planning for some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the United States. He has handled planning and consulting matters in almost every continent and has advised leaders, nations, billionaires, and large multinational corporations. Glenn is the managing partner of Intervivos, largest estate planning law firm in the US, which has been recognized with over 50 international awards for being the best estate planning firm in the United States. In 2022, Glenn was knighted by the Royal House of Cappadocia in the Royal Order of Constantine. Sorry for mispronouncing anything, the Great, and St. Helen. Since then, he has also served as executive producer for an independent television channel before a certified partner for the Unblinded in their executive coaching program, co-founded a bank and assisted in developing a crypto asset exchange company under the regulatory authority of El Salvador and proprietary smart contract system on its own unique blockchain technology. Glenn regularly sits on the board of several nonprofit organizations as well as his own foundation and serves as chief legal counsel for multiple companies. In his career, Glenn has been recognized 10 times as one of the top estate planning attorneys in the country. He has received over a dozen Best Managing Attorney Awards and multiple Outstanding Leadership Awards and Outstanding Advisor Awards. As a serial entrepreneur, public speaker, international consultant, author, and philanthropist, Glenn's experience allows him to relate to business owners on a profound level, whether they are starting a new business or have already established enterprises. Again, thank you guys for joining us today. And Sir Glenn, I'll pass it on to you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we have a small group today. It's the week of Thanksgiving. We're going to try to keep it short for everybody, but we appreciate you spending some time with us today. And what we're going to do is go over just a few basics of why it might make sense as a real estate professional to add financial services, estate planning, and some of the things that we do in our network to your practice. And Kevin's been in the tax industry for a really long time. He's been in kind of the real estate industry for a while. Sorry, Kevin. And he has contacts all over. And as we've been putting this event together, what we thought was that we could share some of the insights that we've seen from some of the most successful people that have made a transition into the financial services industry come from the real estate market, right? Come from either being lenders, loan officers, real estate agents, and we've just seen a ton of success. And for those of you who have been in the real estate industry for quite a while, you know that things have evolved and shifted over the last few years, and the market never stays the same. And so one of the things that we see in the future, and for those of you who may or may not be aware of what we call the silver wave, is that financial services is one of those necessary things that pretty much everybody needs in today's world. And so back in the 1940s during World War II, there was the soldiers went out to World War II. When they came back, there was the biggest generation of babies born in the history of the United States. They call it the baby boom, right? And we call them the baby boomers. And so that was the largest generation born up until its time. And we're just starting in the era where all those baby boomers are getting to the point of retirement. And what happened at the time that the baby boom started was that there were, hundreds of thousands, millions of babies that were born. And there was a little company back then called Gerber that was selling a few thousand bottles of baby food a year. And when the baby boom happened in January of that following year, they outsold their entire year's worth of sales in less than 1 month. And pretty soon they were outselling their entire year's worth of sales in one day, right? And the reason was because there was such a greater demand for what they were doing at that time. Then, those kids start growing, they become toddlers. What did, toddlers and 5, 6 year olds want? They want toys. Well, there was a few companies in the industry at the time that were, Mattel and Hasbro, little companies that became big companies based off of the baby boom, right? After that, there was what we call the age of the muscle cars, right? Where the baby boomers got to where they were teenagers, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and of course they want to drive. And what kind of cars did they want to drive? They want to drive fast cars. And so there was somebody who saw this vision of the baby boom, and he led one of the most profitable sales strategies of all time in the auto insurance industry, simply by asking where are the baby boomers and what do they want, right? And so, in the age of the muscle cars, the Ford Mustang that was developed, with the help of Lee Iacocca, was the greatest selling car up until its time. It may still be the greatest selling car of all time. And later, when the baby boomers started having their own children, and they were growing and needing larger cars, and at this point, the economic landscape and everything had changed. But there was a company called Chrysler that was on the verge of bankruptcy, and they needed something to save them from bankruptcy. So they bring in Lee Iacocca again, and same question: where are the baby boomers? What do they need? And at the time, they needed larger vehicles, so they invented something called the minivan that saved Chrysler from bankruptcy and put them as one of the largest car manufacturers in its time. And so after that, baby boomers get established. They're have their families that are growing. They want to start buying real estate. And if you guys know anything about the golden age of real estate in this country, where pretty much everybody nowadays that's been around for a while started during the golden age, where the greatest demand for real estate was when the baby boomers needed it most. And now what we're seeing is that the baby boomers are getting to the age where what they need is financial services. And there's a baby boomer retiring every 7 seconds. There's $64 trillion that is going to change hands over the next 20 years as the baby boomers retire. And it's not just retirement, because eventually when baby boomers and others start passing away, that wealth has to transfer from one generation to the next. So there's a transfer of wealth, not just in the form of retirement, but also in the form of estate planning. So that's the reason why we're having these conversations, because there's such a huge demand for these services. But as trusted real estate professionals, oftentimes you have conversations with your clients that can lead into some of these other services. So why would you want to maybe have some of these conversations and lead the conversation into additional services that are not part of your core industry? Well, we're going to share with you some examples of why this might make sense, right? So let me start by sharing a story with you. We always like to start with a story, and then we'll give a few examples of some cases that we've handled with clients and things that might make sense. So the first thing that I want to share with you guys is we had a real estate agent that we were working with in Northern California. And they happened to be in a seminar just like this, right? And they heard that we could help with capital gains planning when somebody has a large asset. For example, in this case, it was a rental property that was highly appreciated, and they had a lot of capital gains that they wanted to avoid, because that was the client's biggest fear, right? Was how much taxes they were going to pay on the sale. And they had bought this property. It was a lady that was in that property for a very long time. And then she had moved and turned it into a rental. So she had bought it for like $70,000, and now it was worth, I think like $2.5 million, something like that. So she was going to have dramatic capital gains and have to pay tax on that. And so we were able to put a strategy in place that reduced her capital gains by 80%. And so she paid dramatically less in taxes. Well, what happened from that, right? We were introduced by this real estate agent. It was a one-off referral. And then because of how we helped her, she referred two of her friends that also had properties with significant gains that then needed to or wanted to sell them, but they were holding off on selling them because they didn't want to have to pay the tax. So she said, well, you should work with my realtor. Don't work with any other realtor because my realtor has a team that can help you with the tax planning. Next thing you know, we get a phone call from the realtor and he says, hey, thank you very much. We just got two new clients. They want to do the same thing. He wouldn't have gotten those referrals, but for being able to offer a comprehensive strategy around the tax planning, not just the real estate transaction, right? So what we're getting at is by adding some of these services, you're going to help enhance the experience for your clients. You're going to be able to add more value to them. And then if we can be able to help them and impress them, they're going to bring you more clients, not to mention all the clients that we could bring you as part of our network, right? So we work with the triangle of trust, what we call law, tax, and finance. And real estate professionals come across all of these kind of needs on a regular basis. Your clients need to address tax issues a lot of times. They need to address financial issues a lot of times, and they need to address legal issues sometimes, right? And we have the resources to be able to assist and support in all three of those areas. So let me share with you, essentially there's 4 scenarios that we look for that could be beneficial for us to step in and be able to provide support and assistance as you're helping your clients. The first one, and this is very common, especially for realtors, is working with first-time homeowners. If you've ever worked with a first-time homeowner, you know that they're going into their largest asset purchase, probably of their lives, most of the time. Sometimes the only asset that they'll really own, in their lives. And this is a time of transition, right? And so there's a lot of things that sometimes they haven't thought of beforehand. But now that they have a home, they have a property, they have something that they need to protect because most of the time they're going to have a mortgage, and the mortgage doesn't disappear just because they have an emergency or they pass away, right? And so to protect that mortgage properly, one of the things that we talk about is making sure that they have appropriate coverage in the form of life insurance. If you were to pass away and that debt doesn't just disappear, that's something that that can be covered with insurance coverage. And unfortunately, when you sell a home to somebody, a lot of times they'll start getting things in the mail, leading them in every which direction, right? All kinds of different offers for life insurance purchases. And one of the things that comes up very often is that they get offers for mortgage insurance. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the life insurance industry, a mortgage insurance policy is essentially a temporary policy that will cover however much you owe on your mortgage. So as you pay down your mortgage, the death benefit is actually going down slowly at the same proportion as you're paying off your mortgage, because you're paying for the purpose of being able to cover the mortgage if you pass away, right? What that ends up meaning is that you end up overpaying for your life insurance. And a lot of times people will sign up for these policies not knowing what they're getting, right? Sometimes they'll get an offer in the mail from their credit union or from a bank offering life insurance options that are pennies on the dollar. Come to find out that, and this happens in most cases, that it's accidental death and dismemberment policies. So they think they're covered for anything that could happen. And the reality is that it'll only pay out if you're trampled by elephants on a Thursday, right? And so what we're trying to help consumers be aware of is that if they really want to protect their investment and make sure that they have something that's going to pay off their mortgage in the case of a death or a problem, they want to have something that they will have control over themselves. And there's a variety of ways to do that. There's permanent policies, there's term policies, and there's policies that can, make sure that they can cover their investment without overpaying and without having it decrease on them, without maybe them being completely aware of that happening. So part of the conversation for a first-time homeowner could be, now that you have an investment, now that you have a property, if something were to happen to you, we want to make sure that that's covered. do you have life insurance? And a lot of first-time homeowners don't. That's a perfect handoff for a financial professional to come in and to be able to assist. And by the way, we'll talk about this at the end, but if you're the real estate professional making that connection, there could be a compensation opportunity for you. The second thing that a first-time homeowner needs is they need to protect their investment from probate. If they were to pass away, if they were to have an emergency or they become incapacitated, all paths lead to the court system. And unfortunately, nobody has the automatic authority to make decisions on behalf of somebody else. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that every property owner is protected from the court system and probate if something were to happen to them, because it can be a very messy, long, expensive process. And depending on what state you're in, it can be even longer and more messy and more expensive, right? We had a situation in Southern California. There was a husband and wife. There was a second marriage, right? They had 3 kids. The kids are all, get along. Everybody's in agreement. Dad passed away, right? And so, unfortunately, they owned the property as husband and wife, but they owned it as tenants in common, not as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. So what does that mean? It means that because they owned it as tenants in common, the surviving spouse had to go through a probate in order to get the property in their name. So they go to probate. This is Southern California, right? They open up the probate case. They, go through the steps, the processes. The whole process takes them 2.5 years. And in the course of the process, the judge forces them to sell the property. They didn't want to sell. They were planning on staying there, right? Forces them to pay off the mortgages and because they had some other debts that needed to be paid off. They end up losing all kinds of fees. It wasn't an ideal time to sell, so they lost a lot of value in the sale. And in the end, at the end of this entire probate process, after 2.5 years, they ended up with 1/3 of the value of what they would have gotten if it would have transferred automatically, right? And so that's the risk of going through the probate process. And the way we save them from that is by putting in place a revocable living trust. So revocable living trust is what will help avoid probate, and particularly for real estate. So as soon as somebody owns real estate, that's kind of the marker that we look for to recommend having a proper estate plan. And then, of course, along with the trust, there's powers of attorney and healthcare directives and will, all those good things that go along with it, right? But that's just one example. So if you work with first-time homeowners, it's a perfect conversation. It's a perfect lead-in to be able to add some of these offerings, some of these services, and to be able to provide value for your clients. One of the things that we see when I bought my first home, I remember meeting with my realtor, and we were walking through one of the homes, and he was telling us that there's a life cycle of working with his clients, because of course I was trying to get to know him, right? And so he tells me that when he sells a home and helps somebody get into their first home, he knows that within 5 to 7 years on average, somebody's going to come back for another real estate transaction, whether that's needing to refinance, wanting to buy a new home, wanting to upgrade, wanting to get a second investment property, something like that, right? Within 5 to 7 years, there's usually the cycle. And he says, my job is to make sure that I'm connected with you as long as possible, and that I'm your friend and we're connected and everything else, because when that time comes, when you need another property, I want you to come back to me. And it was interesting to hear, because if you imagine how many realtors, how many real estate professionals are out there, I mean, there's so many in the marketplace nowadays. And in fact, we were doing this seminar last week, and one of our colleagues, Michelle, was sharing that compared to the amount of realtors that there are in the marketplace, there's like 1/10 the amount of financial professionals, right, of insurance agents. And so there's a huge need in the financial industry. There's so many real estate professionals. So that's one of the ways that you can really differentiate yourself, is by expanding services, right? And so when your clients need additional help, additional services, if you have helped them with 3 or more services, that's the statistic, you're 80% more likely to be top of mind for them. And they're less likely to go to somebody else. That's part of the value, right? So what's the second demographic that we talk about that we can really service, that maybe we can add value to the process. The second demographic is working with seniors. If you have seniors that you're assisting in either downsizing, right? Maybe they have a property that they're selling, they want to downsize to something that's more comfortable for their needs, or they're wanting to divest themselves of some of their real estate holdings because they're not, ready or able to manage those properties anymore, or maybe they just need additional liquidity for retirement, right? And so they're selling their home because they want more money in their pocket to be able to live out their retirement. In any of those scenarios, one of the things that our network of financial professionals can assist with is sitting down with them, helping them to look through the numbers and see what makes the most sense. But one of the things we specialize in is repositioning wealth and assets into places where it's not going to be lost because there's guarantees. They're never going to lose, but if the market does well, they can have their money growing, right? And a lot of seniors, that's exactly what they're looking for. The other thing that we can do, we sat down with a family at one point, and they had a property that they had been in for a very long time. They didn't want to sell their property, but the husband had a major medical emergency that they had to pay for. They needed a transplant of some kind, and they weren't going to have the money for it because their insurance was only covering part of it. And so all of a sudden, they had to come up with a bunch of money. They didn't know where it was going to come from, and they didn't know how they were going to get by. And we were able to look at their situation. And in that case, it was actually a really good fit for them to use what's called a reverse mortgage or a home equity conversion mortgage, right? And so they used that strategy to be able to pay for their existing mortgage instead of getting a line of credit like they were thinking. Now they weren't going to have any mortgage payment from month to month, right? They had one of their children that was renting from them. And so that all of a sudden became new income for them because they didn't have a mortgage. So the child keeps paying rent, but now they get to put it in their pocket, right? And they were able to put a life insurance policy in place to replace the value when they both passed away. So instead of paying their mortgage, now they're paying a premium on a life insurance that's going to replace the value of the mortgage for the family. And they were extremely happy. Why? Because we put them in a situation where they were going to be able to meet all of their needs. They had access to some tax-free capital from their equity. They were able to replace the value for their family, and everything made sense. And by the way, they didn't want their home sold when they passed away, so we built that into their trust to make sure that it wasn't going to be sold. That's the type of strategies that we can assist with, right? So if you come across these scenarios, and that was, by the way, that was sent to us by a loan officer that prioritized their clients' needs before commission, right? They could have just done a line of credit. Instead, they helped us with the reverse mortgage, but it was a win-win, and the client was extremely happy. And that client, again, referred us to another one. So that's part of the advantage of working with a network of professionals that are all on the same wavelength, right? So that's scenario number 2, working with seniors. Scenario number 3 is if you have any clients that have highly appreciated property. We shared the story earlier, but if you have somebody that has a business or a commercial property or maybe a rental property and they're selling it and they're going to have large capital gains, most professionals are only aware of one solution, which is what? A 1031 exchange. We have 1031 alternatives. So instead of just doing a 1031 exchange, we have Delaware statutory trusts. We have extended escrow trusts. We have charitable remainder trusts. We have offset strategies. And we can walk them through options to minimize the tax effect. And sometimes that's enough for them to move forward with a transaction that they wouldn't have otherwise moved forward with, because their biggest fear a lot of times is the taxes. Now, if we can help them to avoid those taxes, then a lot of times that means more business for you on the real estate side, right? And so that's one of the things that we can also specialize in, that we can help with. We actually have an ebook for exit planning. If you're interested in the ebook, send us a message in the chat and we'll send out that ebook to you. And then the last scenario is occasionally we'll come across people who want to expand their real estate holdings, and they have a hard time being able to qualify for enough capital to be able to expand the way they want to. Well, what's the solution? One of the solutions is that they can actually establish and be their own bank. How do you do that? Well, you put together a structure that will allow you to borrow from yourself. And one of the best types of structures that does that is leveraging cash value life insurance, putting away enough inside of that cash value so that you can then borrow from yourself to purchase or acquire new holdings. And that doesn't have to cover, the full amount necessarily. It could supplement traditional loans. But a lot of times when people are in the investment space, they're constantly struggling to be able to have enough capital that they can leverage. And this is one of the ways to put control in their hands, right? And so we have solutions to be able to do the bank on yourself concept, to be able to borrow from those established structures, and to be able to leverage for life or for real estate holdings as you grow and as you buy into new properties. And we've helped dozens of investors to do these kind of structures, and it works great when done properly, right? And so those are the 4 scenarios that you may come across that we can really provide value for. And what we'd invite you to do, and I'm sorry, we're again trying to keep it short for you so that we don't take up too much time on Thanksgiving week, but also, we have a small group today, so we just wanted to kind of keep it short for everybody. If anything that we've talked about today resonated with you, if it was of interest, if you'd like to continue the conversation, if there was something that we can assist with, either with your clients or to have a conversation about how you might be able to benefit on the financial side of adding this to your practice. Because by the way, just for making a referral, you don't have to handle all of it. It requires getting a simple license. It's a 100-question test. It's much easier than the realtor exam, trust me. I have a friend of mine who took the realtor exam 32 times and failed, and finally passed on the 33rd attempt, right? He took the life insurance exam, and which is the only license necessary for a lot of compensation on the financial side, and he passed it on the first time, right? So much easier than the realtor exam. So that's one of the things that that we can look at is you don't have to handle these cases. You can bring in another professional, let them handle it. They'll take it from start to finish, but then you'll be able to continue having that tie to your client and assisting them and being able to service them, with the real estate side as those needs come up, right? Same thing with the legal side. We have financial compensation built into the referral process that you can actually get compensated every single time that we help with an estate plan for your clients, right? So if that's of interest to you, we invite you to talk to whoever invited you today, and let's have a conversation, see how we might be able to do some work together. So we're excited about being able to connect with you. We have a lot of realtors, loan officers, and of course, financial professionals, legal professionals across the country that we work with. And there's a lot of professionals making a lot of money in this space. So this is something that can help differentiate you and can give you a competitive edge when it comes to helping more and new clients. So Kevin, just wanted to hear your thoughts as we wrap up here. We'll open it up for some questions. If anybody has some questions, you can put it here in the Q&A box or in the chat. But Kevin, any thoughts that you wanted to add as we wrap up here?
You pretty much nailed everything that I was curious about here too. And I know, given the holiday, I did get a lot of responses that a lot of people were busy. So I'd hope we can host another one of these and get back around when people, get back into it for live action with you. But no, more so, I was really curious what you mentioned on with the infinite banking strategy. I know in my network, I've had a lot of talk about it, so I just want to be able to educate and show how to add value, how to add that line to strengthen relationships with, not just being a realtor. You know, sometimes the market goes up and down, and if you have all those other services, there's always people that can benefit from it. So you got my attention.
Awesome. Well, come back to the next one of these that we do. We'll let everybody know what we're going to do it. We'll go into more depth on that particular strategy.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it here in the chat or in the Q&A. And otherwise, thanks for joining us and have a great Thanksgiving. We look forward to connecting to you soon. Again, talk to whoever invited you today so that we can have a follow-up conversation.